Got sauce.
Obviously, this is our first episode of Got Sauce. I'll go and explain what Got Sauce is about, but this is like a revolutionary time as well as conversation. You have Gene Smith, who played on the '84 national championship team, who's my co-host. And Georgetown was responsible really for sort of setting the tone as it relates to Nike and them being this rebellious brand and integrating into what we call the hood, so to speak. And then we have the notorious Sam Siegel, over 40 years at Nike, built Nike New York as well as influence from a global perspective, managed Foot Locker and, keeping all of the New York retailers in check, which it's enough in itself. But we're going to tap into his unlimited sort of experience, background, and stories and philosophy of getting after things. And we'll get into what sauce is. And then we have Jerry Alloco, one of his byproducts and my former partner in crime as it relates to Nike Sportswear. And when I think of this episode and I think of how these two fellas influenced me as it relates to the sneaker game, the thing I think of is accountability. Getting the job done, doing what you got to do, and there's no excuses. And I'm sure through the stories and our questioning and all of these sort of dynamics, it will come out. But our show is focused on the young professional that's looking to understand the sauce of those that are successful. The current professional is looking to advance their game, and those that are interested in forward culture, forward brands and forward individuals that have made impact in different industries. This industry is dear to our hearts from a sneaker perspective. We're hoping to tap into that. Sam and Jerry have never been interviewed before, and I cherish this as an opportunity to be able to do it, as well as it's a crime just based on the hidden but major impact they've had on the sneaker game, and you would never know it.
What's interesting? What's interesting, Drew, at Sam's 80th birthday at the New York headquarters, they had such a wonderful event for Sam. Totally took him by surprise, but they had a few people speak, and I was fortunately one of the ones that spoke. And my last line was, "Thanks, Sam, for allowing me to ride shotgun for 37 years with you."
But he had the gun.
Oh, dude, I was just,
you were polishing bullets.
Yes.
Polishing bullets. So let me explain kind of how the show is going to work. This show came about, there's a viral online called Juice versus Sauce. And Juice is temporary. Juice is bot. Juice is Grant Hill versus Jordan. Juice is Popeye's chicken sandwich versus Chick-fil-A. They may have a hit. They may come in, and we're finding that Netflix is even Juice to so to speak. They may have a period of time, but it comes and goes, much like juice itself that you drink. It's consumed. But sauce, it's sticky. It sticks. It comes from purpose. It comes from inside. And a lot of brands are driven, and that's why you can see the difference. A lot of individuals, particularly these two individuals, are driven. The thing that I love about Sam and Jerry, they have nothing to do with sneaker or hip hop culture, but they are the forefront of sort of making this happen on a number of levels. Many people associate them during our time period, but these guys were in the industry way before me. These guys built Foot Locker at the highest level and battled with those guys, told them no, and really restricted. But the most important thing I would say is they were in the number one sneaker market in the world, New York City, undoubtedly. Before the internet, that New York City set the foundation. I'm an LA guy. We rock kicks, but cars served as more of our culture. But from a New York perspective, they built this industry. They are the godfathers of this industry. And it relates to Sam Siegel. The best way to think about it, he is the Nick Saban of the sneaker industry. Bottom line, in the number one market, much like Alabama being the number one team, highest expectations, the most grimy, dirty, but savvy retailers, and he had them in check. Everybody feared Sam, but just as much, you know, if you get to know Sam, you know, a lot comes from the heart. But if you get on his other side, he will cut your heart and have you eat it, dog. Scramble it however you want it. You know, it works sort of both ways. You know, he's no punk as related to this, but he had to conduct himself that way. And obviously with HR and way things are run now, that isn't legal. But in the early days of the sneaker industry, the early days of New York, you had to have that. There was no way, you know, people would take advantage of you. And I tell you this, Sam Siegel is no one taking advantage of it. As it relates to Jerry, as it relates to sportswear, I get a lot of credit for it, but Jerry swung across this as related to before I got there, after I got there, and served as a mentor to many of those that replaced me in that coveted PLM position of limited edition, which is Nike Sportswear now. So, you know, although I get a lot of the forefront credit because I bridge the culture, these cats taught me the business. These cats know the sneaker business like, but they just know business. It just happens to be that they were on the sneaker side of it and manage it and led it the right way. So we're going to sort of kick this off. Gene, you have any sort of things? And I'm ready to jump into questioning with these two sort of hidden pioneers.
So I appreciate you asking me if I had anything, because, you know, I was getting ready to say the three of us can basically check out and you can do the rest of the show by yourself. You know, you're supposed to go back and forth. Like, give me one of the guys. You don't have to take both of them.
Hey, I'm new to this.
What I'm like, I'm gonna put you on pause. I wish I could put you on pause. So what I'm going to share is a different point of view of Jerry and Sam, and this is where Drew and I really connect, because he has one point of view and I have another point of view, but we're trying to get to the same place. And a lot of people that you do business with, you have to agree with everything they say. And that's difficult for me because I'm looking for the optimal situation. I'm looking to get there. I don't care who takes the credit. I just want to get there. So everything that Drew said was facts, but I'm looking at it from a completely different point of view. And for me, Jerry and Sam represent everything about hip hop. They represent everything about culture. They were the renegades within that behemoth, within that monster called Nike. And, you know, I don't want to be too long-winded because I really want to get, this is about you two. But I just wanted to say a couple of things. For me, Jerry, the fact that you were, this surfer, this skateboard, this eclectic cat who, was knee deep in the wire. You were knee deep in what moved the culture, but you were unassuming. There's this saying, bad boys move in silence. You two were stealth. You moved quietly until the business changed, when you could no longer do the things you did to become successful. You had to, and that's all about things evolving. So for me, I loved how you carried, and you also carried a bag. That meant something to a guy like me. You carried the bag, you put in the work so I can listen to you. And then, you're just an analytical beast. Mr. Siegel, I don't say this lightly. We didn't share, it was all indirect. I mean, I was at Nike for 22 years. You were there for 40. I was there for half of your tenure. So whether or not I dealt with you directly, indirectly, you had such an impression. You made such an impact on that company and me specifically. And you reminded me of the gentleman that I played for 4 years. In that, no nonsense. I'm focused. I deliver. I expect high standards. And that's culture, right? That's something you can count on. And season in and season out, you might have been a lone voice in the room, but you stood tall. And for a guy like me who working at Nike, I started at Nike in '86, and I had no real clear agenda, any real clear path. The academic coordinator at Georgetown told me about a job at Nike and told me to go check it out. And next thing I know, I was on 2 different planes with 1 set of underwear, talking to Nelson Ferris or somebody. I don't know who I was talking to, And then fast forward 22 years later, but I just want to say, you move stealthily. I almost like the fact that you've never been interviewed, because it's you're an industry secret, and some things it'll come to light when it comes to light, but the fact that you two are here means the world to me, and I wouldn't have missed this opportunity for anything. So I want to thank you guys.
The reason that we didn't have our we're running it. We just did our job, and all the people we work with, they respected us, we respected them, we worked together. It was great teams. We used to have a good time. So whenever we went, we traveled all over the country with a lot of people, and some are still around and some aren't, but basically it was an opportunity that nobody could believe, and we enjoyed it. So we weren't looking to take the credit, because a lot of the other people did the work, and we felt they should take the credit. So we weren't there for credit. We were there to doing the right thing for everybody.
And Gene and Drew, Sam and I had tremendous respect for the culture. We didn't look at people based on the melatonin in their skin. We really looked at people for, who they are, and the fact that there was so much love for the brand, and in particular, certain styles like the Air Force and the Max 95. The fact that Sam and I could work with somebody like you, Drew, who was a cultural connector for the brand, the first one. I mean, there were other product line managers that did the renditions of limited edition before you. Thinking of Chris Lindgren with Sports Classics. Actually, the first PLM of Sports Classic was a rep, as Gene knows, Jeff Tapkus. He did that for 6 years, just sending in insights from Harold.
Out of Baltimore, we must claim that, out of Baltimore.
Yes, yeah, the three amigos out of Baltimore, Harold Rudo, Paul Blinken, and Tony Tranis. And the insights then led to having that position be a training ground for inline categories. And the first person they hired inline was Chris Lindgren, and then after that it was Fritz Taylor, and then Bill Reen, and then you took the category.
Don't forget Brian Clare.
Oh, Brian Clare, that's right.
Can't forget Coach.
The 3 months cup of coffee he had doing Sports Classics. That's right. And but when you came in, you had the insights from the bottoms up, I would say, from the street up. And limited edition, Sports Classics, and now Sportswear was never the same, because you brought the insights of the consumer. Guys went out to, certainly the Rucker and West 4th Street to get insights, which was great. But you brought a cultural perspective that the brand hadn't known, and was better off for you being in that position as you left that Eakin position in LA to come into product.
It was nice us blending sort of the chocolate with the peanut butter. Me learning the business in New York City, being an LA guy, but being hungry for, curious for culture. And I think that's the trait you have, Jerry. You have a passion and love for other people's passion, and sneakers happen to be it. And then being able to feed that is unbelievable. So the theme of the show is sauce. And I don't know if you guys know, but sauciers or sauce chefs, that's the highest rated position in the kitchen. And, sauce is this, homonym word that has multiple meanings. You know what I mean? Have it be the actual, sauce that adds flavor to a dish. But as you start applying it to culture, it's those who walk cool when nobody's looking, or do the right thing when folks aren't looking. It sticks. It's timeless. It doesn't have a season. When you make sauce, it lasts, and it has an impression on people and influence. So what I want to ask, our quirky question from a got sauce sort of perspective, is how do you start your day before you get into your sauce activities, before you were retired? These two gentlemen are retired now, but during your life, some may, wake and bake, others may work out, others may pray. Like, you know, both Sam and Jerry, you guys decide who goes first. If you guys could sort of share with the audience, when you were in the heat of it, how did you start your day?
Sam, you want to go first? I can go first, whatever
Okay,
you want.
well, I was in the sporting goods business, and we had a respectable business before Nike. And I'd be up 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd have accounts I'd call 8 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't get home till about 8 o'clock at night, had dinner. And from 9 to 12 o'clock, I'd speak to reps. So a new rep had to speak to me 3 nights a week, and an old-time rep one day a week. And I want to know if they're up, they're down, and why. And then I would visit them on twice a year with a rep. They had to pick me up in my car, and we had to travel around and go to key accounts to make sure we're doing the right thing. So it was really, it was like an 80-hour a week. So we built it that's how I built it from bottom up. You know, a lot of guys would go to be sleeping. I call up, he's sleeping. I said, wake him up. I'm up. I mean, I didn't get to sleep till 1 o'clock. That was
And I can tell you firsthand, because I was many nights, the midnight call, because I was the last sales rep hired at Metro Sports. And the phone ringing, or at the time,
Metro Sports was the agency that Sam owned before Nike took sales back in-house. So I want you guys to realize that, and not to put Sam on Front Street, so to speak, but at one point Nike was renting his building, and he was paid as a hired consultant by Phil Knight himself. So he was never really a Nike employee.
So if that's not hip hop, I don't know what is.
I never worked for them as a direct. I worked as a consultant. Actually, I used to meet with Philip Knight initially several times a year. So that was a very interesting opportunity.
So I just want to dive in here on the how Sam broke down when he was, you know, when he was running his deal, and how he checked in with his flow, and that would have worked so well for me. Because I was into accountability. Regardless of what the optics were, I don't think any rep at Nike Mid-Atlantic worked harder than I did. My goal was to get to New York, because that's where I thought the best reps were. That's where I thought the best agents, that's where I thought the leadership, that's where the business was. I was in the Nike office late one night because, you know, you find out more things when, you know, when the lights go off sometimes. And a fax came through, and obviously it wasn't for me, but it had the salaries of all the reps in New York. And you guys were making more money, so I wanted to get there. But just listening to you, Sam, in terms of calling the reps, making them account, because I took those very seriously whenever I had the manager in the territory. Because again, it's your time to shine. This is you know, this is the All-Star game, and you know, for a rep. So I took that really personally. So it was nice to hear you say that on record.
When we first started, Drew started with us, we were traveling all over the country with him. So we had a team, about 4 or 5 people, and there was a lot of respect, but we did things that nobody knew how to do. We were selling profit to the retailer. And nobody's ever done that before, because everybody is looking to do business and make more money for the company. We want to make more money for the company, but we also want the retailer to be profitable. So they never were treated like that, where people spoke to them that way.
Drew, I remember the first time we walked down Fulton Street in Brooklyn. And we're walking past Dr. J's, and then we got to the jewelry stores, and they had Air Force and Jordan and the shoes like that. And you turned to me and you said, I know I can make product, but you got to fix the distribution. And it was funny because at the time, I was manning the street for US merchandising under Ron Hill. I had come from sales. But the great thing about Nike at that time was they allowed people to do what they do best, which is to seek out new ways to do business. And I was like, well, it makes sense if we could assure the proper flow of product in the marketplace, everybody would benefit. And although we never cleaned up the third oldest, profession in humankind. I'll leave the first two off, but transshipping was the third most oldest
Right.
profession, especially in retail. You're never going to clean it up, but we did in such a way that the product got to who it was intended for. And that was the kids on the street that just had a love affair with Nike, love affair with the models of shoes, particularly the Air Force. And it was really a pleasure to be able to be out in the street, because that way I wouldn't have to be in the office and Sam killing me every day. And second
but Jerry, you have to tell that story from a sales. The sales guys didn't understand that at the time.
I mean,
it took Drew, someone from Oregon, not a sales guy, said, "Yo, what's up with the distribution?" A sales guy at that time, they was just clocking. They was just clocking. And
well, as you know, Gene, they were held to a sales target, and whether it was 5% up or whatever the target was, because it was always a positive number you had to deliver, they had to do. And as you know firsthand as a sales rep, once the line expanded, both inline and sports classic, there was very little time for the reps to be able to get out into the marketplace. And that was the beauty of Drew being out in the marketplace, as well as myself as the man in the street. We saw what was happening at street level.
Yeah, the beauty of that is unlike most brands, they chase juice versus curating culture. And we removed Air Force One's part of the season out of Foot Locker and national accounts. And then it became the #1 shoe in the world, #1 selling shoe of all time. And it's just, too many folks are chasing juice versus engineering and curating sauce. And that's the art of it. At the time, the short term was I could sell so many more. But the long term was if you created, managed the demand, you could keep that hunger there. Where a lot of brands have classic products that are timeless. But that's where they sort of abuse them, and they don't have the luxury there, as well as they sort of stop innovating, so they overcompensate. Don't want to get too far, Jerry, but how did you start your day back in the day? You know what I mean? You're on the Jersey coast, heading into the city for the madness, such an oxymoron sort of lifestyles.
Well, that was the weekends of which, there would be the dawn patrol where, as soon as morning light, if the waves were there, I'd be out, surfing until the beach patrol came on at 9 o'clock. During the week, I would get up at 6 o'clock and swim a mile at the local YMCA. So to start the day and be ready for whatever had to be given to us. And it took the edge off. Instead of a cup of coffee, it was like,
Jerry
6
had edge. Trust me, Jerry had edge.
Especially back then, Drew.
Yes, definitely had edge. So, again, the theme of the show is sauce, and your saucy ears. I'm trying to say it in French, but I think I'm struggling a bit. Maybe we start with Sam. What are the ingredients to your sauce, your success, Sam? Sam, you literally have never had a losing season in my eyes. You've led the powerhouse, the most powerful sneaker market in the world. You've managed the biggest account in sort of Foot Locker, and excuse my language, you told them fuck you.
I'm getting calls on Nike like you wouldn't believe. So and the line was picking up, but there was no inventories because everything was on futures. So all of a sudden, we're starting to build a business, and we had a lot of competition. They owned the business, and Nike was just coming on. I mean, they were doing about $1 million in New York, and in fact, I started with Nike in let's see, in 76, they hired us, me and my partner, and we started in 77. And Nike in 1976 was doing $14 million a year. In the following year, they were doing 28 million. Me and my partner, we were doing 32 million. So we said, oh, what's so great about Nike? okay, so who knew they're going to be that big? But we saw opportunities like I've never seen in my life. And
Sam, did you carry, what other brands did you carry before Nike?
Louisville Slugger. I had a small athletic clothing line. I had a sock line. I was doing about $1 million a year. We had Saranac Glove that we were doing a lot of business with. And we were also in the ski rep business. My partner did most of that. And most of the lines that we worked for, we used to do most of it.
I hear through the grapevine that your territory was like in the deep South, like Alabama.
Well, no,
Well,
yeah, when I started out, I worked for a small company that do a few $1 million, and all of a sudden they decided to send me down south. I was about 20 years old, and I went to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee. For 6 weeks, I was traveling, and the car wasn't air conditioned. So I came back home 6 weeks later, I lost 20 pounds. And that was good. It was very healthy. and basically, they needed me as a rep going down there. It was a tough deal because, you know, it was at that time, it was Russell Southern. It was companies that were very important to the industry at that time. And coming in from a New York concern, it was a challenge. I mean, it was something it's hard to believe in how you went through all these towns and they were poor. There was no big roads. I went through every small town there was, and it educated you. How do I move more north where it could be a lot easier?
What always amazed me about you, Sam, with your ability to manage upper management, a rookie like me, the retailer, you know, having be a small mom and pops, you know, on Fordham Road, or sort of Foot Locker. Well, from a people skills perspective, like, how did you do it? Like, you had this magic. I mean, you remind me of my junior college coach. It was nothing like doing a great presentation and coming to the side and seeing Sam give you that smile, like you kicked their ass.
Well, we did differently than the industry. The industry had either a lot of the large accounts were out of New York at that time. So you had the large accounts, some reps called on them and other reps called on the small accounts. But me and my partner, we called on both. And we called on the big and the small. So people knew us. So we were doing the Hermans, we were doing department stores. In fact, when we would do a department store, they needed a lot of help to write their orders. So we used to take the orders home, write up the distros, and a week later give it back to them, and the order was done. Because if you waited for them to write the orders, you're never going to get an order. They just had the help to do it. But we traveled, you know, the whole market together. We saw the opportunities where it wasn't working, and how do we pick up that business where Nike wasn't doing anything. Like even we went into communities that we really didn't fit. We'd go into a mall, and the guy said, "You guys really don't fit. What are you doing here?" And I said, "How come we don't fit?" He says, "You know, you don't fit." He said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Nike." He said, "Could we talk?" I said, "Sure, but I can't help you." But we could talk.
And Drew, that was the Capitol Mall in Milwaukee that we had that happen, which was really good because much like when we traveled Chicago, when we went to Cisco's and Tony Sports, and I had beer.
Jerry, to the audience, when you talk about this travel and going to these markets, kind of what were you doing, as well as, please don't forget, I want you also to share your ingredients to your sauce. But can you go into kind of what these market travels and what your purpose was with all that?
Well, the secret to the sauce was when I read a book like 20 plus years ago, when it said it was better to be a revenue generator than an income dissipator. And to me, it was a simple phrase, but it really kind of put the thought in that if you were able to generate revenue in whatever you do, then you're going to be an asset with any organization that you are involved with. And fortunately, Sam had hired me back in '83. And I always took that if I was able to deliver, and I always felt that we had to place the consumer first, the retailer second, and the brand third. And by doing that, all those three parties were successful. And as a result of their success, I benefited from that success. Now, going forward with the travel, Sam always had us go out in the marketplace to get insights, to understand, going into stores, making sure you understood what was selling and why it was selling and to whom it was selling. And by taking that philosophy, we just broadened it to when you and I and actually the predecessors to you previously, they would have maybe a 1 week a quarter to get out in the marketplace and to get insights, on colors, materials, what shoes were trending. And by people like yourself bringing models out of the archives or DNA, was able to test what people still had interest in, unrequited love for that product. And as a result, as you remember, we traveled 4 different paths during the course of the year to make sure we got a national perspective, but by city, so that when you put a line together, and never forget what Ron had mentioned when you and I first started together. And I was funny because I was like thinking I'm still the sales guy, but he said, Jared, your responsibility is to make sure that you go to 10 cities and you're not going to get the ability to make 10 lines or product lines for each city. You have to find the thread of commonality so that one line would sell in all 10 cities. And that's kind of the foundation that led us to the market travel, that helped people like yourself and others after you build a line that was representative to the US marketplace at that time.
So I'll interject here because we were talking about sales, so I'll jump in here. What you two gentlemen established was a cadence for the company. What was natural for the way Sam did business, what was natural for the way that you were taught the business, Jerry. Every agency that they brought in-house, or the reps, when they brought everybody in-house, they had their own set of habits. And what you two gentlemen did was establish almost like a checklist. And obviously it wasn't implemented the same way in every region or in every territory, but at least there was a playbook. And, saying no was a good thing sometimes. Letting a guy know that, you're the hot guy on the block and you only want Air Force Ones, but your customer wants the latest and greatest in innovation. So you're going to need to bring that in. So again, what you two gentlemen established, even though, you had access to the highest, Phil Knight, you had that type of access, you still were grounded in the business.
In the streets.
You still were grounded in the culture. And again, for me, I just had respect and appreciation for that. Because, sometimes corporate America can be all about me too. It can be all about, I'll just echo what my boss says. It's not challenging. You two represented challenge, right? You put Nike in the position, either you want to sink or you want to swim. Drew made the analogy, the football analogy, to Nick Saban. I'm an old hoops dude. I'm not going to give you a Nick Saban analogy. I just, what Sam, and this is specifically to Sam, Jerry, what Sam represented to me was a veteran coach that changed the industry. He was a coach who had a way of doing business, and he laid that track down, and everybody follows it, and it's evolved in its way. And as we go along, I'd like to chop it up with Sam. I'd like Sam to talk to us about four decades of business and how he's seeing his role change over those 4 decades. But I know Drew got something else to drop.
The only thing I wanted to say is I want to make sure the audience realizes, and I'll ask Jerry this question. How many billions of dollars between the New York landscape, us influencing SB as well as Jordan and how they do business in sportswear, how many billions of dollars of business do you think that you and Sam influence?
A lot.
Billions. I'm not talking million, folks. I'm talking billions.
Well,
Sam and Jerry, Don't tell your secrets, man. Don't tell your secrets.
Don't forget when they started, they were doing about 14 million globally. And then they went to 28 and I'm doing 30 or 32 just regionally, just in my own business. So the opportunity, in fact, we started the sportswear business. If we didn't start it, they wouldn't be in it today. And that's probably about the $15 billion business. It was.
And you set the foundation even before Jerry and I, you know, took the blueprints and ran with it. You really set up the discipline and the mindset, even though people had to be reminded on the rep and account side, but you set that up, Sam.
Initially, I was not looking to sell everybody on the street. So I would handpick the accounts that we could work with. They were making a lot of money. And everybody, I'd let them grow. And I would get calls, maybe 40 a month from new people or other people who want the line. I said, listen, when we're ready to open, we need distribution. We'll call you back and we'll work with you. But right now, we're probably making as much goods as we can make. We're selling. So it's not healthy for us to overload the market. So
again, I want to remind you, when Sam stopped with the agency and stopped dealing directly with reps, he was still dealing with every rep in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if you had the opportunity to attend the sales meeting, when Sam and Jerry walked through, it's basically people.
I'll tell you,
You're looking at them like, well, I'm going to be able to take my kids to fund my kids to go to college because they have that much power. Remember, we influence on allocations.
We put Nike into the boot business, and I don't think Nike really didn't want to do this, but we had some people who got involved with us. So we were going on the road and we made some real special shoes. And then a couple, especially one rep said to me, Sam, I have to be honest, I don't think I could really sell this shoe. I said, that's not a problem. He said, no. I said, Bob will take care of it. He said, who's Bob? I said, the guy who replaces you. It's not a problem.
And Drew, I want you to understand.
Calls me back that night and he said, you know what, Sam, you're right. There's no problem. And we really gave, what's the name of the brand, Jerry?
Which one?
Timberland?
Okay.
Yeah.
Bear, Tresetta, all those.
We took their business. I mean,
Timberland.
it was smoking because a lot of things that we did, we took care of in fact, Jerry had a whole stash where we take care of the key accounts that we were like, we give them shoes, the key guys working on the floor, we give them boots, we give them things, we gave it to the bouncers. We did a lot of things. How do you build the business from not being in the business? So we always looked at, we had nothing but an opportunity to grow with Nike and new opportunities for the retailer to make money with us. And people were happy to get that.
Yeah,
and you share that time. Once you share that time, go ahead.
Let me get this thought out, because you know, when you're 67 years old, you might
cut it out.
Right?
Cut it out.
So the brilliant thing of Sam that I learned when I started with Metro Sports Sales in like '83 was Sam was way beyond the curve, because we had a shoe called the Air Epic. It was the first $100 running shoe. And Sam was wise enough to know that not everybody could sell a $100 running shoe, particularly in the mid 80s.
1984 LA Olympics. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, and so what Sam did is he initiated allocations, 24 pairs. That was a number that Gene could remember from many of the allocations we had on limited edition product. But the other thing that Sam really understood was not all shoes are going to sell in all geographic parts of his territory. For instance, I was the new guy, and everybody couldn't wait till Sam hired the new guy because they were able to offload all their smaller problematic accounts. So I think when I started from Sam, I had 120 accounts. And the one thing that Sam said is he really kind of educated me. These are the accounts that are going to get access to Air Force One. These others, especially at the time, there was no internet. It would take 6 months for a trend from 125th Street to go over the George Washington Bridge to suburban New Jersey. But there were obviously appropriate areas where the key consumer lived, that we earmarked those shoes. And as we went forward and developed what we knew as limited edition distribution, it was predicated off those two tenets that Sam had taught me a decade before in Metro New York.
Well, can you tell some stories of kind of when Nike wasn't the global leader in New York City? You guys were the underdog. And,
Well, listen, when we started in 76, Nike, they were doing some business, but I think they were doing about $1 million a year. And basically it was just, people were just buying a couple of shoes. And when I got involved, I made them buy the line. They had to buy the line. You couldn't just buy, they would come into you at a show or something like this. Let me have 2 cases of Bruin and Blazers. So every account, and then we had future orders, and we never really lost an order because people were making a lot of money on us. So every year we would increase the business and not load it up where they needed more. So we were selling futures, so we'd flow the futures. And we really never lost a futures order. So because if somebody couldn't pay the bill or had a problem, we sold to somebody else. We always had 40 accounts waiting to get the line. So we purposely did that. So we always had a place to move goods.
And Drew, you got to remember, in the mid 80s, Nike was an upstart running company from Oregon. And so, you know, Adidas was the market leader in running. Certainly Converse was in basketball. You had brands Puma with the Clyde, you know, with Walt Frazier having worn it. So, and then you had tennis brands. So it was in its infancy, the sneaker marketplace. And so there were probably 15 or 16 brands that were all competing for shelf space. And Nike was not the leader back then. As a matter of fact, there was probably a decade where there was this intense battle between Reebok and Nike to be, you know, especially when Reebok came out with the garment leather, soft leather shoes that just took the city by storm. So we had a fight. It was a true fight to get Nike product placed. And that's where we had to develop our salesmanship, because there became a time where Nike was so strong that there was the challenge not to become just an order taker. But in those early days, you really had to be a salesman to get the product placed. And thank God, because it was so innovative product and really moving technology, especially, as you know, when we got to Visair with the Max and the Trainer One and the Revolution, did all of a sudden, we were then able to separate ourselves because the unbelievable innovation. And that's one thing that, as people either are looking for a job or in a job, to be with a company that innovates, because if you don't innovate, you die. And fortunately, you can see Nike has innovated and has, I think we're celebrating our 50th year as a brand. So that's the thread.
One second, Drew. I want to jump in here because Jerry said something about culture, and I just want to dive in on this a little bit, because you know this is remarkable that we have you two here. As corporate culture changed and evolved during your tenure at Nike, what was it like trying to communicate to people who didn't have Nike necessarily in their DNA? How are you guys consistently able to tap into the young culture? Because as you guys mentioned earlier, it was about the people for you. You guys didn't want any credit. It was about the people that you wanted to have the credit. So what was it like for you both to continue to shape the culture?
I'll tell you the thing that we did differently. Like we started to travel with Drew, we were traveling around with the Nike product people. So the key guys would go on the road, and like a Charles Williams, all of a sudden, even those days, we go on the road and we travel everybody from the area and find out what's selling, what's not, and we develop a relationship that they can go in and start to do the same thing. But we always traveled on the road with the key people in product. They were great. There isn't one person that was really bad. So they learned, they would make changes, they tweak shoes, And to this day, they still do some of it. But that was the key element, that we just don't make goods that people don't want to buy. So we were showing the product, and the product that we showed, it did sell in most of the markets. So that made it very
Sam, hey,
strong.
Jerry, did Sam coin this phrase? It's just sneakers and t-shirts?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, don't overthink it, you know? But Gene, for me, it was always the balance of doing right by the consumer versus right by the bottom line. And that's always a challenge that Drew mentioned, that a lot of brands have their, I believe, if I'm using the analogy correctly, Drew, they had the sauce, but they couldn't figure out how to get it. Well, they had the juice, but they didn't know how to sustain it with the sauce. And I think it was always this dynamic that ebb and flowed. With the more success we had with connecting with the consumer, the bigger the business became. And to Gene's point, the bigger the business became, the more people like, what the hell are they doing? I remember Ron asking me a question when you and I were doing it. And there was, and I'll just leave it as a very significant person of upper management went to Ron and said, what the hell are these guys doing? They're doing over $200 million a year in this business at the time. And Ron goes, honestly, on a day-to-day basis, I don't know what they're doing, but they're obviously doing it well and bringing new consumers to the brand, meaning that the retro consumer, which Nike was so innovative that they replaced the Air Force with the Airship, the Air Tran, then the Air Force 2. People like you showed the company that there was this unrequited demand, that's people wanted that silhouette, but in new materials, new colors. And you brought that you brought the city edition, which was off the charts with NYC, LA, and so on and so forth. And you localized the product, and people thought that was just magnificent.
Very incredible. So, answer this, and this is both for you. I mean, particularly Sam, because I've just seen the undefeated seasons. Tell me about a time you guys had bad sauce, or didn't work.
Say it again.
When you had bad sauce or things didn't work.
Yeah, bad business time period, Sam.
Who had time to think? We were too busy working. hey, listen, I worked in the sporting goods industry. You want to see bad times. I mean, that was a whole different world. And yeah, we did a lot of business, and but it was a real crazy time. And this was a little different opportunity where, all of a sudden, the company, after a few years of doing $1 billion, and and I would speak to management. I said, "Hey, you can do a lot more. You haven't. You should be doing $3 billion now. It's not one." And they said well, that was one of the smartest things you ever said. They really liked that idea, and they had to start to figure out how to get to $3 billion. And so that was always an opportunity where if you were satisfied and happy, you weren't doing the right job. So I was never satisfied. I figured we could always do more, but we got to do it in a different way. You can't just keep loading people up with the same goods.
Sam, didn't you piss off?
Hold on, Drew. Hold on.
Sam, didn't you piss off hold on, Jerry? Didn't you piss off one of the presidents one time with giving Phil such a big number, which made his job much more challenging?
Well, yeah, that was probably part of it. Then that didn't help. And but I always voiced my opinion, and I didn't fit. I used to wear a 3-piece suit. I was the only one walking around with a 3-piece suit, or a suit and shirt and tie, and that's why I never really went inside, because I thought differently, and I saw opportunities differently. And they were very smart people. They did from top down. Everything I did was from bottom up. So it's a big difference when you're working with the people and you're listening to them and you care and you bring in people to listen to them. They felt special about it. It was special that nobody else was doing it. They didn't know how to do it. And Nike, it was a great opportunity for them to take it to the next level. And that happened for years, year after year.
And the brilliant thing about Sam, Drew, even in bad times, especially during the Reebok garment leather times, Sam was smart enough to know that he could have opened up New York all at the same time, have a boom year or two, and then drop off the face of the earth. What Sam was brilliant at doing is, as other agencies showed decline, Sam had the ability to open up the account spigot just enough to bring on new accounts that would provide growth for his agency. So as other agencies were going down, Sam had the ability to sustain it or even grow it during difficult times because he realized it's not always going to be rosy. And you better have an option B or C, because option A is either never going to plan out or it's going to run out at times. So I give him credit to have the foresight to be able to do that.
It was also
And
let people make a lot of money with you, and they didn't forget. So I'd call in all my favors. I said, hey, listen, I helped you when you needed it. We need you. Okay, you got your order. You got the same amount as I gave you before, no problem. Most of my accounts, they work with us. You know, if the rep couldn't get it, I'd go out with them. I said, hey, I think you owe us a little bit. And I called in IOUs, and they were happy to do it because
Building relationships. Building
Yes.
relationships.
I mean, a lot of people reference Sam as the Don and Jerry as the consigliere. And I take that very, very serious. I mean, again, he ran New York and in turn ran the whole country. Right. So again, this is coming from a person that was on the ground. I'm boots on the ground. Every move these gentlemen are making impacts my business. Nothing that they ever set out as a strategy confused me, because already in my DNA was when it's bad outside, find the opportunity. If it's raining, sell them some Gore-Tex. You know, it's always something. You know, so the philosophies that you two represent worked perfectly with my DNA. So,
well, what's interesting, Gene, on that, and you know this because I'm sure it was in one of our presentations, the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. So if you didn't have something simple, and I'm not saying that sales reps couldn't, comprehend a complex distribution strategy, but if you kept it simple, it was easy to execute. And if you executed, then you got the, results you were looking for.
in fact,
and I will interject integrity. I will interject that. Right?
Yes.
You had to have your wits about you, because if not, Sam was gonna call you stupid.
Right.
Hey, before you jump in, Sam, I just want to take the minute to commemorate and send love to the late Lenny Springer, one of the classic New York sales reps. And there was a correlation between Sam and Lenny, so to speak. We don't necessarily have to dive into it, but I want the man to know, Mr. Welcome Back Carter himself, that our love is with him. And it's been a while since his expiration, but he was one of those ultimate sort of guys that stood outside the culture but did the right thing for the business, the brand, and the people.
Again, Sam, I just want to let you know, it's one of those things you don't get credit for. With you being at the level that you were and being your own person and having your own style and kind of being on the outside, that made it okay for people like Lenny, people like me that were not necessarily cookie cutter for Nike. It made it easy for us to be successful.
Well, it's amazing because I had a look, because I have all my friends' kind of memorial card underneath the glass on my desk, that it's been 16 years that Lenny has passed. And what's amazing about Lenny, he actually helped me have a career at Nike, because Lenny established the Sam rules. And when you were a new hiree, and at that time it was Metro Sports, and then it became Nike Metro, Lenny would lay out the laws or rules so Sam wouldn't kill you. So I personally loved Lenny, because I would go to Lenny and I'm like, man, Sam's just on my ass. What's he looking for? And then he'd say, well, you can't worry about the bite. Just listen to the words he's speaking. And from that was incredibly educational. And I thank Lenny for establishing the Sam rules. And Sam, you had told your grandson as he was prepared to connect you. What did you say Lenny said about what it was like working for you?
Well, people asked Lenny, what was it like to work for Sam? 7 years of hell at that time. Well, for the reason he came in from another field, they weren't used to really working, and I expected a lot. And a lot of people weren't willing to give a lot. Today, they don't want to give anything, but years ago, they were looking not to put in those hours to do, but that's what it took. And it took me even longer. I was working 80 hours a week. I was working on Saturdays. I didn't ask anybody else to do that. I'd get up early in the morning, and I remember when I was running the New York office, and people say, "Hey, Sam, we need some more help." I said, "What time do you get in the morning?" I said, they said 9 o'clock. I said, "You have a key?" They said, "Yeah." I said, "You can get in at 8. That's not a problem." I said, "What time you leave at night?" They said, 5. I said, you still have the same key, right? You can lock up. You can leave at 7, 8. I don't care what time you leave. I said, "I'm not leaving before 7 anyway. So do whatever works for you. But we don't need more people. You need some more hours." I see.
We had a joke.
The problem.
We had a joke, Drew, that Sam had a term. What are you working a half a day? And what that meant was 12 hours. So if you let work less than 12.
Tell the stories that Sam in the summer with the 3-piece suit, wingtip shoes, fedora, on the blocks, out walking everybody.
Yeah. Well, we had one Nike official on July 4th. It was amazing. Sam said, "Hey, I've got this guy coming in. It's July 4th. If you don't want to come, I could understand." And I said, "Yeah, I'll come. I'll be happy to." I was in shorts and a t-shirt. Sam was also, he was in his summer mode. He didn't have a vest, but he had a jacket and slacks on. And this other fellow had Italian loafers and just dressed to the nines. And Sam, we were out in the market for about 9-10 hours. I think it was mid-90s, hot humidity like it's been this week in New York, as you know, Drew. And the poor guy got back to his hotel room, and he was married to a ex-Nike rep employee who told us the story. Yeah, when he came into the hotel, he went to bed at 7 p.m. So to walk the streets with Sam was an experience in itself.
He called me up the next day. "What'd you do to my husband?" I said, "What did I do? I was just out in the market with him. I didn't do anything."
Hey, Jerry, where do you see kind of the sneaker industry the next 5 to 10 years going?
Well, it's different because so much of it was built on relationships and from the bottoms up. And as we enter this world of digital retail, there are pluses and minuses to go into that era, but it's still critically important to keep relationships with the consumers that you're trying to sell your product to. And also from the standpoint of keeping those relationships with retailers. And so wherever the marketplace goes, there's still going to be that demand for product by consumers. It's going to be interesting how all brands addressed satiating that demand.
Also, what I would do for all the years I was at Nike, every 2.5 to 3 years, I would change what I was doing or change how to do it, because otherwise you became boring. If you couldn't change and move forward, have different ways to think and different ways to do business, you're out of business, especially more so today. So a lot of people, they're doing a lot of business. All of a sudden, things are changing on them and they don't know what to do because they never changed. So change.
And what's so unique and what's so cool about what Sam just said is most salespeople at that time of the game weren't thinking that way.
I call it, they had a milk route. And that's what they deliver the milk every day. And that's the same way. And all of a sudden, people stop buying milk off the wagons.
Right. So Jerry, from your side, outside of Sam, who had the most influence on you in the industry?
Actually, Ron Hill. Ron was incredible. Ron came from Nordstrom's as a merchandiser, probably the first merchandiser the brand ever had. And what I always respected about Ron was that he was the quintessential insider, meaning that he was from Oregon, he worked in Oregon, but Ron had the uncanny ability to be in the marketplace a day or two and get it. And without mentors and people that would be able to communicate what we were trying to attempt in the field, Ron would be able to interpret that to the people he was reporting to. And we were able to do, as you remember, what we did. And I think that was because of his ability to kind of really connect what Nike was doing from an authentic innovation standpoint. And yet at the same time, with the genius of kind of connect the unrequited demand for the product. And so Ron was a tremendous mentor and still a very good friend. So
so Jerry, I want to go a little bit deeper though.
Okay.
Okay, because obviously you got this, when you got the SAM, there's going to be a certain amount of molding, shaping, receiving, giving, because the thing I remember most about Mr. Siegel is if you're not giving them anything, and then you're really not talking to him. Like he needs that. It needs to be an exchange.
Well, Gene, you remember when he said, we're in the entertainment business. We're not in the footwear and apparel business. We had to entertain the consumers, right?
So keep that thought. But let's go before Sam. Let's go back to whether it's college, whether it's high school, because you had some dog in you. Because that's what I think that's what Sam pulls out of people. He pulls out of you, making you be your best self. So where did that come from prior to Nike?
For me? Yeah, so,
You're a Scorpio. You're
yes,
a Scorpio.
That's it, Drew. That's part of the makeup, Gene.
Share trade.
Yep. The other thing is that I grew up, my dad passed away when I was 2 from cancer. So my mother had no choice but to go out, find a job for my brother and I, and support us. And to her credit, she never made more than $13,000 a year. She worked in a factory, drill press operator. So I learned that kind of work ethic from my mom. And it just, whether it was sports in high school, I swam in college, whatever I did, as you remember, because it came off, if you knew me, it came off as passion. If you didn't know me, it came off as an asshole. And I know that.
Why do I understand that?
Because we were 2 Scorpios in a pod.
So again, pause. Sam, I really want to know, before you got to Nike, as you're growing up as a young man, who were your mentors? They must have been some prison guards. But who helped mold and shape Sam Siegel?
You want the truth? Poverty. I never had anything. I went to high school, used to walk to high school. I had 2 pair of jeans. I had
what part of town?
And
what
I
part
had
of
an
town
army jacket. Huh?
What part of town?
East New York.
Ooh.
New Life Avenue. Last stop on the IRT. When the train went by, the building used to shake. Okay, so I knew I had to do something different. And so I graduated high school and I went to night school about 3 months. And I said, I can't make any money doing this. My first job was $45 a week. And then I had 2 or 3 jobs working the same week. I quit going to school. I said, I can't do this. I need the money. So I realized I wanted to do something and make some money and learn a lot more, but do it a different way, because it wasn't going to be going to college. So I learned how to work and how to think people by just watching what they're doing, listening what I'd go into a store and sit there for a few hours. The guy says, listen, I'm not interested in buying anything from you. I said, it's all right. I'm just looking at what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. And after a while, people would say, well, what am I doing right? I said, I said, you don't have the right lines. I said, you can't make any money while you're doing it. So after a while, people started to buy from me because I was making the money, and I didn't, and not even from the lines I was selling. So I looked at it differently because I wasn't just looking to sell guys a lot of business, because you're not going to last long. It just it's a different way to think, a different way to operate, because I had a hunger in me that I wanted to do well. I wanted to live better. I wanted to have something. I didn't have anything when I grew up.
Sam, but were there any individuals? Because your story, I couldn't have wrote it, but it doesn't surprise me, because I have some of the similar things in my background, in my journey. And I have the ultimate amount of respect for any individuals.
Not really. I'll tell you what, my first job, I worked in the garment center, and they started me in the mailroom. I said, well, all right. So I show up next week to work, and they said, well, we got a problem with you. You don't fit. I said, what don't I fit? Well, you have to have a suit. I said, I don't have a suit. They said, well, when you have a suit, come back. So I borrowed $50 from my mother, and I wore a suit for the next 3 weeks until I got paid again. So, so I learned how to work, and I was working in those departments, and you were working with some salespeople. Used to help them carry the bags, and you sit there and learn from them. So one sales guy takes me out, and we're in the county. He says, wait outside. I said, well, how am I going to learn if I'm sitting outside? He said, that's your problem. So I left. So the guy comes back. He said, how come you left? I said, I can't learn anything from sitting outside. He said, well, you didn't carry the bags. I said, that's your problem. I said, basically, I'm here to learn. And so I learned how to work, and work for a lot of different companies. And how do you get to the next level? What are you missing? Where's the opportunity? And I used to do, when I was working in the industry, I would do about 40 shows a year. I would travel from New York to Pittsburgh. They would have dealer shows, and we created new businesses.
Wow. And the other thing that was brilliant about Sam was that once a quarter, Sam would just call you the night before and say, okay, I'm coming out with you, and then would travel the entire day. And what was worse, he was driving the top of the line Mercedes-Benz rig at the time, and he would have you drive. So not only do you have to think about, okay,
hip hop,
you were like, God, please don't let me get in an accident with Sam $80,000 Mercedes or whatever the cost of it was.
I'm gonna say it again, hip hop.
Hey, Jerry, what's your biggest regret, or what would you do over again?
My biggest regret is that I couldn't continue to do what we were doing, and still be with the brand that was unbelievable. Because Drew, what I looked at it wasn't a vocation, it was an advocation. And for your listeners, if they could find an employment situation where they don't look at it as a job, but something that was fun. And for those of us that worked at Nike, you were either an athlete of some sort, high school, college, pros even. And so what better way to go into earning a living by participating every day talking about sports, whether it was basketball shoes, cleats, baseball. It was just a pleasure. And the one thing that's disappointing is that you get old, and society looks at you in a different way as you age. Some societies look at age with wisdom, and I look at Sam like that. Even at his age today, he has quite a bit of wisdom that he still can impart to people.
The memory's insane. The memory's insane.
Yes, sharp as a tack, right, Gene? So that's the biggest regret, that you just age and you just find yourself on the outside looking in. But the memories and the stories, whether it's with you and Gene, or whether it's with, Ron Hill, Dave Siddons, Jeff Tapkus, John Barber, and everybody else that we talk to, it's like you turn back the clock 30 years and everybody's back doing what they did. And more importantly, has the spirit of passion and love for each other because we had a shared common past.
Where's the
So I'm going to interject, and I'm going to talk directly to Sam. So there's no way I would make the comparison of Drew and I as a duo to you and Jerry. But what I find so astonishing, what I find so interesting about you two is that, again, your point of views are different. But you're trying to get to the same place. And oftentimes it's by any means necessary. And it's like your feet may be held to the fire and you got to move on the spot. So sometimes you can't plan things out. So, you know, for people, particularly at Nike, Sam was always, you know, it was that fear factor. It was like, what's he going to say to me? How is he going to disarm me? And for me, being from the East Coast and the I-95, that engaged me, that excited me. There were very few people in the hierarchy like Sam. Sam was a lone wolf. And Jerry, you were right there with me. I'm so interested again in how did you continue to come back season after season and be influential with the young people, particularly in Oregon.
Well, for me, Gene, and I'll say this, the first 2 years of working for Sam, I hated the son of a bitch because he was demanding of things that I had never had anybody place on me. And what Sam's method of his
Drew, I'm getting excited. I think I got 4 years left to say.
The thing that's funny, Jerry, is that me and Gene didn't like each other the first 2 years of our career with them.
So what I didn't realize because of my youth, and sometimes youth is wasted on the young, right, is that you think you know everything and you don't know shit, right?
You don't know what you don't know.
That's right. And that's what Sam is.
Yeah. Sam, I had somebody tell me that very early on in life, so I already knew that.
Yeah. So what I realized, and it was the epiphany or pivotal point in my career at Nike and with Sam, we're at the Great Neck office. Sam's just beating the living shit out of me about, you know, what are you doing? What is this? And I said, Sam, look, I'm young. I'm new. You've got, at that time, probably 20 years of experience. I can't mind read. Tell me what you want to do, and I'll do it, because he knew what he was doing. And I was of the personality that if it made sense, I was going to go with the flow. And that's how it went for the next, we worked together over a 38-year period. I said the next 36 years, that's how it went. We had such a, you know, his insights that you didn't even see. And he would point it out. And I'm like, another funny story. He would repeat. He would repeat things 5 or 10 times. And I quietly would say to myself, what is the old man losing it? You know, he's repeating himself. I mean, I don't get it. Without ever talking or saying, we'd get out of that meeting and he looks at me and he goes, you probably think I'm nuts. And I'm like, did I say it out loud? But, you know, the point was, he said, I have to repeat it several times because you know they're not going to hear it the first 3 or 4. So if I repeat it, they obviously think it's important because he said it 5 or 6 times. So I thought that was a brilliant insight.
Back to Sam. Wasn't the question posed towards Sam, or no? Was this an open question?
Yeah, please.
So the question, Sam, is how did we roll over a 30 some odd year period? How did we continue to work well together? And how did we continue to help new employees and mentor them?
Well, on my part, it was the right way, the wrong way, and my way.
No dictatorship there.
Well, no, it was.
And
Well,
again,
you had a good idea. I said, let's do it. I never had a problem with somebody coming up with a good idea to make us better. I just had a problem when people just didn't want to work. And
it's a theme with you two. It's a theme, not being starved for the credit. The work was more important.
I didn't need credit. In fact, though, you know, we started to do apparel, and the apparel line was just okay, and men's and ladies. But I found, you know, all the guys who were doing it, selling footwear and apparel, and they weren't selling apparel. So I started to hire women to sell apparel only. And my business doubled and tripled because the women, they knew how to sell apparel, knew how to handle it. So I was probably the only agency that had all women just selling apparel. So we started new ways to do business, new ways to think. You just couldn't do it the way that it was normal. There was no such thing as a normal. Like today, I don't even know what normal is, if there is any normal. So it's different. Everything is different, but there's new ways to operate. You got to change. So if you can't think of change now, you're in trouble because everything's changing around you. It's been doing that for years, but a lot of people just never saw it. I only saw that for the reason that I always wanted to get ahead. I'm still hungry. I mean, I'm basically, it wasn't about money. It was about, I remember the time when Rob Strasser, he left Nike and he wanted me to join Adidas. I said, Rob, I tell you, you said you can make a lot more money with us. I said, that's not the point. The point is they hired me. I did a lot of work with them, and I'm loyal. And I can't leave. And he respected that. We were good friends when he worked at Nike.
I think the three people that, to me, three criminal points within Nike that people that individuals or teams that don't get credit. I think Georgetown basketball doesn't get enough credit as it relates to their impact on Nike's business.
Well, Mr.
I don't think
Thomas
Sam Siegel, I don't think you do as well as it relates to your sort of this hidden icon, you know, if you know, you know. But the other one would be Strasser. And I was wondering if all three of you, including Eugene, could share a little bit about Strasser and his impact on the industry.
He was a genius in marketing. He was a presence. He was a big guy. When he walks into a room, the room stopped just to hear what he had to say. He was a nice, really guy who helped them get started as far as marketing, as far as doing things. I mean, they made things happen. So for some reason, I got along really well with him. And he'd come to New York. He said, "Okay, Siegel, let's have some lunch." He never had money on him. I had to buy him lunch. I mean, it was the greatest thing I've ever seen. But
We were sales, Sam. Sales always had to pick up the tab, Sam.
yeah, but I'll tell you what, between Philip Knight and Rob Strasser, yeah, genius. I mean, Philip was a genius in what he did. And Strasser was a genius in marketing and the energy and the direction and what his thinking. He was unbelievable. And you know what? I felt proud to be part of that group. I didn't fit, but I was really happy to be part of that group.
Sam, I'm going to disagree with you. You more than fit. You more than fit. They needed you on that wall. They wanted you on that wall.
How about you, Jerry? What's your thoughts on Strasser?
Strasser, my first sales meeting, I'm coming down an escalator and there's Robbie with a straw hat on, a Hawaiian shirt, and he had to be 6'4", 6'5", 350 pounds,
Yeah.
just boisterous. And I said, I don't know who that guy is, but I like him. Because at the time, and Gene may remember, at that time, every sales meeting, I was in a Hawaiian shirt, you know, from the culture that I came from, the surf culture. And so,
Was he a lawyer?
yes, he
Yes,
was
an
actually, go ahead, Sam.
Well, he was Nike's attorney that when Nike was getting the shoes from Tiger, they had the license and they broke the contract, Tiger, and he won the lawsuit, and they got $1 million, and they were able to keep the names of the shoes. Not the shoes, but that started Nike, and it was Blue Ribbon Sports before that.
Right. Gene, you must have a Strasser story.
Yes, I do. And it's no surprise that, to me, that Sam got along with Rob and Jerry as well. I'm sorry, Bob. For me, when he started Van Grack, you guys remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He pulled me to the side. It was like, I see you, and we doing something in DC. You would kill it, and you know, maybe not on the level of Sam, but I had a loyalty to Nike as well. Again, optics aside, they were the best show in town. Some of the most creative people. They challenged me in ways that were not necessarily my comfort zone. But again, my background, my DNA was built for that. But Strasser hit me up on the Van Grack tip, and there was a scenario early on in my career, and a lot of people had this happen to them at Nike. You were literally told you were going to be fired the next day, and that happened to me. And you know, Strasser was one of the few cats that I had spoken to prior to taking the job, so he was my short list. So I hit him up to let him know what I was going through, and he basically said, "You can handle it. Go through it. Do what you need to do. Dot your I's, cross your T's. Contact all your people. Let them know how you're." He just gave me what I needed at that time, which was basically look in the mirror, it's on you, make it work, make it do. But yeah, just an incredible human being, kind, thoughtful, and I don't have too many of those stories at Nike where somebody just pulled me to the side, and I'm probably guilty for that because I'm not very good at asking for help. But he was just one of those guys that stepped in without a hitch.
So I mean, I think this is a wonderful session. I think there's no way in this amount, first session we can get everything in. But Jerry and Sam, I'd like you guys maybe to share something that, you want people to be informed of, something about yourself, just in kind of closing, if you could just, this is sort of open time for you retirees, so to speak, to you got the mic. And, maybe start with you, Jerry, and end with the GOAT himself. And, just something that you want to tell, people in the industry, forward thinkers, as well as those that, hold and make sauce much like yourself or have that desire.
I think the key, Drew, is especially when you're young, not to think, as I said before, that you have all the answers, and be willing to listen to people like Sam that had the experience and the wisdom and actually had the desire to see you be a better sales rep and even a better person. And so, and Sam would kid around with me over the years, back then you love everybody and so on and so forth. But what I really appreciate our relationship over the years was the ability to develop a relationship with Sam beyond business. And I would say that for people in the workplace today, if you do get a mentor, because I always used to say to new people that came on board and said, "Oh man, Sam's just beating the living shit out of me. He's kicking my ass." And I said, be thankful that Sam is doing that, because if he didn't think that you had a future, if he didn't care for you, Sam wouldn't speak to you. So the fact that he was taking the time to, just like John Thompson probably did with Eugene, or a drill sergeant and people that are in basic training, if they're just, because what they do and what Sam did was, and I didn't realize it at the time, and I think it was Lenny Springer's insight, was what he was doing was tearing down the pre-Nike or pre-Sam or pre-Metro Sport person and building you into being the best employee or best sales representative you can be. So if that's one thing I would say is for your audience, to don't get your back up if somebody comes at you hard, especially in today's world, because if they're coming at you, most of the time they're trying to improve you or help you grow as an individual. So that would be my closing.
Well, my closing is I looked at Nike. It was a privilege and an honor to meet. There were a lot of very smart people there, and the product people were the best I've ever met. I mean, it was just to go out with them. So I looked at it really a privilege, an honor, and I never thought I'd ever have an opportunity like that to first of all, to help run a lot of these businesses and be part of it. So I thought that it was. I loved it every moment of it. So there was no way there was anything really bad that anybody could do to me. I mean, my whole life somebody was always after me. I mean, I just try to be 2 steps ahead. So and that was always a challenge, and I like the challenge. But the opportunity to be with them, it was a special culture, and I was never part of it. But I brought some stuff that nobody would. I would tell them the truth. I mean, most people, you're speaking to your boss or your manager, you didn't tell the truth. I just tell them the truth. They didn't like me for it, but I told them the truth anyway. So I wasn't afraid of getting fired. I said, if I get fired, you get fired. Hey, but I had a way of doing it my way. Otherwise, I couldn't do it. So I appreciate everything that happened. And anytime I could help other people move up and get into their realm, it was my pleasure.
You got it, Gene? You have any closing
Yeah,
remarks?
yeah. I'd like to close again by thanking both these gentlemen for laying hands on the industry in the way that you both have. And obviously, the 20 plus years I spent at Nike, you guys were pivotal in shaping that. But again, I cannot overemphasize how important you two were in how you moved. Jerry, something as simple as the Hawaiian shirts, right? Bringing your culture. Again, I can't think of more hood and more hip hop than wearing Hawaiian shirts in a three-piece suit at a Nike meeting. Like, people don't understand those optics. So
what we used to do, Gene, is I used to say Sam was class and I was crass.
So again, the impact, again, and I'm speaking on the personal level that you both had for me was, whether you're liked, whether you got an entourage of people, what do you bring into the table? How are you making it better here? And that was just the overwhelming theme with how you two moved at Nike and the blueprint that you laid and the tracks that you laid. And I personally, I am forever in debt. And thank you very much. And I hope you two will never retire. You're both doing something. I have no idea what. But I've never had the opportunity to say these things to you both. And I don't know what it has to do with juice or sauce, because I'm still trying to figure that out, Sam. I don't.
Listen, from
I'm gonna get
there's
sappy.
no finish line.
I'm gonna get sappy on you two, but on the record, I want you both to know that I love you.
Back at you, Drew.
Thank you for everything.
And honestly, it was a privilege for Sam and I to be able to work with people like you and Gene and everybody else we did, allowing us to have input from a sales perspective, because Sam used to tell me, look, just don't cross silos, because if you cross silos, you're going to get killed. So I was in the sales silo. I kind of morphed a little bit for a merchandising gig, but the ability for Sam and I to cross silos and people look at us positively versus, hey, swim in your own lane. We'll handle this. It was a privilege to work with you, Drew, and people like Mike Parker and Sheldon Donnell and all the other PLMs we worked with. And thank you for teaching us and educating us on a culture that we weren't from, but we certainly respected.
Appreciate it. Anything else, Gene? I mean, I can't say better two guests to kick off a podcast. This is a classic. We're probably going to want you guys on further. So, Sam, we need you to hang tough.
Well, the first 100 years are the hardest.
And please don't hesitate. If you guys ever want to come on or want to share anything, we always have room and time for you. I know Gene shares that sentiment. And hey,
well, you go forward, Drew, and evolve, sauce and juice and sauce. When it comes to specifics, topics, experiences, and I think I speak for Sam to reach back out to us, because as we found out with speaking to others, we could go on for weeks with stories and insights, but to just have a first general overview. And then as we come back, as you refine your format, You can count me in, and I'm sure Sam would say the same.
I don't think we're gonna get Sam back on, but if we do, I think it would be cool. I do want to add, I also want to thank you again because I know you both, even though you may be doing a lot of these, it's not really, you guys aren't front runners like this. You're not seeking this, but I'm really thankful because you have so much to offer and so much to share. And far be for me to compare myself to you guys, but I'm not really big on, jumping on a podcast and talking about my Nike days. But when it's gentlemen like yourself involved, it's authentic, it's real, and not a lot of people have the opportunity to hear it. And you've made such a positive impact. And again, can't thank you enough.
And my statement is, it's a pleasure and opportunity to be on your podcast and work with you guys, because as far as I was concerned, especially with Drew, when he left, I told basically anytime, if I was starting a business, the first guy I would hire would have been Drew, because this guy, boy, could he work. Does he think good? He was smart. I mean, I have nothing but respect for, I still do. It hasn't changed one bit.
Yeah. I remember, Drew, when we were out there in New York, and I only had one rule: just post, and you always did. And I'm sure there were a couple of mornings that you came straight to wherever you were meeting or we were meeting, and you just worked until 7, 8 o'clock that night. And I had tremendous respect, because I would have been laying in some corner sleeping with a newspaper over my head.
Yeah, what Jerry's talking about,
Sam, you'll appreciate this. This may not make the actual podcast, but I purposely made sure Drew thought I didn't like him those first 2 years, because what I didn't want to happen, Sam, is for him to get associated with my bullshit. So I kind of wanted him to, because the guy was making me money.
Transparency.
Sam, the guy was making me money. So I didn't want anything to happen to him. And all I can say, Jerry, is working as close with Drew as I have since leaving Nike in 2008, since they got rid of me in 2008. I can only say I'm probably his last standing friend, because the guy nobody works as hard as he works. Nobody expects more of the people that he's working with. And unlike, I think, other people that he's worked with in the past, I get it. I hear it. Like there's no gloves. Like he literally, will let me know from the beginning. And I love it, because we often just don't agree, but we agree on where we're trying to go.
Yeah.
So again, yeah. So again, thank you both. Thank you both.
Thank you both, and be in touch again. I can't thank you enough. And the podcast is starting off the right way with us having these two guys on, these two leaders, these two pioneers, and we'll be in touch.
Drew, you know what I found interesting? There was a comment on LinkedIn about, wow, you're starting with those two guys. How do you follow that up? The bar is fucking high, right? The bar is high. That's how you follow it up. So again, thank you both.
I'll bet money on it that you guys will exceed the bar on your next podcast. So we wish you the best of luck, and we look forward to it.